Sorry, exactly. That was not uncontroversial.
Sorry, you cut out. Could you say that again?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so something that comes up really frequently are the cemented policy changes made by Tim Yohannan in the January-February 1994 issues regarding major label releases, namely to explicitly forbid them from review. That's pretty well known that MRR didn't review major label stuff. However, there was also an additional decision to limit review of releases from indie labels that were emo, heavy metal, post-hardcore, and pop, as in like pop punk. For these genres perceived bloated and non-punk attitudes. Obviously, this didn't occur in a vacuum. 1994 isn't exactly the year punk broke, but close enough. The decision prompted further splintering of the scene, or, growing theoretically, leading to like other large-scale zines in the 90s, like Heart Attack and Punk Planet. Anyway, like some people, a lot of people, like Larry Livermore from Lookout Records, started accusing MRR of hyper dogmatism. And that was kind of a thing that existed within punk as a criticism for a long time. But anyway, the debate regarding selling out to major labels at the time of the 90s pop punk boom can come off as sort of quaint in the White Claw sponsored Sour Patch Kids session era of music we find ourselves in. But still, this was a shift in the culture of punk and DIY, one where MRR stood firmly against any concession to either corporate interests or aesthetic deviation. It could be argued that this steadfastness of purpose was mythologized and hard-coded into maximum rock and roll by the tragic passing of Tim Yohannan. Epitaph did count as a major label at the time, but Fat Records didn't. From what I remember, it seemed to have to do with whether you distributed your records through major label channels. So if you ran your own distribution, you were an independent label. Anyway, sorry, that was just a question from somebody else. Anyway, only 4 years after this thing came down, Tim Yohannan died quite tragically of lymphatic cancer at age 52. While MRR was started by many and remained a collective project throughout its history, it was nonetheless seen as his magazine by people both participating in and who hated the magazine. His opinionatedness was legendary. One example, obviously, is the beef between MRR and Agnostic Front, which that could probably be a whole separate conversation. But anyway, there were a lot of beefs. And like MRR doesn't necessarily present as a monolith. Like, anyway. But, sorry, I got a little derailed. Anyway, some dirt dug up by former columnist Lefty Hooligan outlines some less than savory actions taken by other founding members, which in many ways goes to illustrate Tim Yohannan's legacy in comparison. Jeff Bale, who Larry Livermore cites as hardly delusional or dangerous, in his final MRR column, excoriating Tim's rule against major labels as closed-minded. That guy moved on to become like an alt-right Gavin McInnes kind of type who like spouted racial slurs at people who damaged his property. Ruth Schwartz went on to become a millionaire hipster capitalist who attempted to union bust her record distribution company, Mortem Records. Mortem had been dropped by Timeo as the distributor of MRR for reasons we can pretty easily speculate on. And Jello Biafra in 1979 went on to become Jello Biafra in 2021. Like, I don't know. Anyway, in comparison to all that, Tim Yohannan remained at MRR, railing against corporations and the state of America until his death. The zine was far from over at that point, and we don't want to create the narrative that it ended with Tim Yohannan. Like, obviously, you can see, even 15 years later, it was still an extremely active collective project. It had so many shifts in coordinators, columnists, bands covered, high points and low points, depending on your own personal taste. And like my entire personal interaction with the magazine exists in this chronological space. However, after 37 years and 431 issues, in May 2019, the final printed issue of Maximum Rock and Roll was published. The death of the iconic fanzine presented a definitive shift in subcultural representation.
Just a quick, this is a scan that Connor took from Maximum Rock and Roll 351, which is the 30th anniversary issue, where everyone is speculating what the end of MRR would be, or if it would still survive 30 years from now. So really now, unfortunately, we're going to talk about the death of MRR. The differences between 1982 and 2019 for a punk fanzine can be tallied but not totalized. The print magazine had been running a deficit for close to a decade, a collapsing network of available mail distribution and increasing postage costs. Wait, yeah, there we go. Skyrocketing rent prices in the Bay Area and decreasing subscriptions led to an inevitable end. From a peak of 30,000 subscribers per month, the magazine had hit a low of around 3,000 per month for the last year of its print. The final end to the physical version of MRR is shrouded in equal parts obscurity and animosity. Who pulled the plug? Where'd the house go? Although we did admittedly want to dig up the dirt on the final hours of the MRR house, we also realized that while putting this together that there's a lot to celebrate. MRR is such a gigantic and long-running project that casting second, third, and fourth-hand gossip over the legacy kind of seemed like a cop-out. There's a comment on the video that we started with that says, "These hipsters killed MRR." And not to be not to be indulgent, but as someone who has been around DIY spaces a lot, I feel like I've never heard someone say something like that who spent any amount of effort on something that they have actually poured their time into. So there is a lot about Maximum Rock and Roll that looking back on it, there's an idealization of this gigantic project versus the burnout of never having enough people and people always giving their time purely for the love of the project. Looking from the outside, what we see is a long-running idealization of this giant project, really. And the greatest enemy to any community project is always the lack of resources, be it monetary, physical, or labor-based, in comparison to a project's scope, which Maximum Rock and Roll just, it was a giant project. It's hard to maintain it, and it's kind of amazing that it lasted for as long as it did. At this point, because we wanted to split it in two, I think this is where we're going to end. And what we want to talk about next week is, now that we've laid a basis for Maximum Rock and Roll and what happened with their projects, we'll talk about what the archive is now. There's this quote from Grace Ambrose, who's one of the longer running coordinators, about how MR is the record collection is an institutional archive instead of being a history of punk, which I find, well, we'll dig into it next week, but next week is really more about, you know, punk archives, what that means, what personal archives are, what internet archives do, and like what the future of all of these things are.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah.
Does anyone want to talk about anything before I put on Danny's video about crust?
Let's hear about crust.
All right, I'm opening it.
Wombat is signing on somehow. Hi everyone, I'm Danny.
Oh.
Wombat.
We don't have to wait for her, but she's trying to sign on somewhere, wherever she is.
True. Oh, I just saw that comment too. We're definitely going to talk about archive.org next week. I have too many, we just had too much to say about like the internet and internet archives in general. So instead of boring you all for an extra long period of time, we're just going to split it up into 2 pieces. But archive.org, yes, the GOAT.
And yeah, if there's time, I could briefly talk about what I know about Agnostic Front and MRR. That was something that I kind of was iffy about including like in a long-term sense, since it's not exactly what the project's about. But I thought it was worth including to, again, go back to Sasha's point and Grace's point that MRR isn't a history of punk. It's a, you know, it's a history of an institution that was both of punk and really influential in it. But anyway, Agnostic Front, I think in issue 7 was reviewed what a lot of people in New York felt to be backhanded, basically saying that, I don't know about this band, they seem like Nazis. Which like ignited a lot of shit. I mean, like, Victim in Pain has the execution of a Jewish person on the front of it. Like, Agnostic Front has lyrics about, you know, welfare bums. Like, it kind of gets into the same debates that we have now of like, just because I'm of like, people in Agnostic Front's camp were saying that we're not Nazis, we're just conservative. You're a bunch of privileged liberals. How dare you call us Nazis? Anyway, there was a lot of back and forth. And there was a review that was kind of popular, or there was an interview with Agnostic Front that ran in MRR that included a lot of commentary on top of the interview from Tim Yohannan, basically taking Agnostic Front to task for their conservative viewpoint. And, you know, you can go back and forth about it, but I just thought it was a good example of that MRR represented a very specific viewpoint. One that I honestly share of like, I don't know. Sorry, this was a little freeform. But basically, there was scene beef. It was scene beef in a massive way. MRR was seen as West Coast. A lot of people in New York didn't fuck with Maximum Rock and Roll because of that. And I think that's been an ongoing thing. Anyway, there's actually, anyway, I think that's pretty much all I can say without sort of plumbing into like either making a mistake or just getting into my own opinions too much, I guess. Anyway, scene beef is scene beef, and whether it was 2021 or 20 1981, 2021, 2081. Scene beef is going to be scene beef. And I don't know. Whatever. I'm out.
Yes. I'll punch please
Thank you guys so much.
after this video.
I'm excited for yes.
It's crust o'clock.
Crust o'clock.
Hi everyone, I'm Danny.
And I'm Wombat, and today we're bringing you here to teach you a little bit about punks, rockinest, rollinest, rootinest, tootinest, ugliest, smelliest, dread mulletiest, politically condescendingest subgenre, crust.
Without further ado, let's jump right in and start with the world's first unofficial crust band and everyone's problematic fave, Amoebics.
We should start off talking about Amoebics because they're really the first band to bring the heavy metallic riffs and sound with a dark, pessimistic, and intensely ideological like punk attitude and thematic content.
Yeah, well, being heavily influenced by metal bands of the late 70s like Sabbath and Venom, but with like the aesthetic and attitude of Discharge and Crass.
We say unofficial because flash forward a couple of years from 82 to 85, 86 when Hellbastard releases their demo called Ripper Crust, formerly coining the phrase and giving a name to the face, sound, and aesthetic of Crust.
So in 1986, Hellbastard Ripper Crust was released. Absolute essential listening. Here's the cover. And then for some reason this happened as well in 1993. I don't know. Up next, also from the UK, the absolutely infamous
Anti-Sect.
Anti-Sect was active around the same time as the previous two bands, with In Darkness There Is No Choice being released in 1984. They are one of the first bands to be mixing this newly emerging, heavily metallic sound with anarcho-punk aesthetic and content. Hope, future, poison, pride, fear. Which brings us now to Deviated Instinct. Wombat, didn't they coin the phrase stenchcore?
Yes, stenchcore originated from the 1986 Deviated Instinct release, Terminal Filth Stenchcore, same year as Ripper Crust, so the terms kind of come about at the same time.
I really feel like with Deviated Instinct is when the aesthetic of crust punk really came about, with crust pants, just filthy hair, just everything, pure filth.
The hottest band in punk all time.
Hands down. And somewhat a fairly active band.
If you count playing like 3 shows in 2019, question mark. Now for the ladies.
Nice.
Behind the Realms of Madness came out in '85, and with Sacrilege, we have to kind of define what crust actually is. Is it metal played by punks, or is it hardcore punk taken with extreme metal influences?
We love them, but they made some entirely unlistenable music in 2015. Okay, now let's talk about
Napalm Death. Starting in '82 as a peace punk band, they released a series of demos before their debut record, Scum, came out 5 years later. Pioneers of the grunt and genre are super important to crust and pioneering the cave crust sound.
They look really fucking sick. Starting in 1985, one of the first ugly, grindy, thrashy, fucked up bands, Extreme Noise Terror.
The most jacked crust band. Watch Raping the Earth music video for proof of how fucking yoked these guys are. The Chaos UK Radioactive Ear Slaughter split.
Shout out to KSUK on this sick pants.
And he's been very terrible self-titled full-length in 2015 that features 4 Guy Fawkes masks and split with Reality Crisis in 2017.
Up next, we have thrashing crust icons, Concrete Socks. I'm pretty sure that this is just like at someone's parents' house, or at least I really hope so. This is some practice footage from 1991. Wanda, what's your favorite Concrete Socks release?
Probably Suicide.
Sick. I really like this split with heresy. Oh, sick, sure.
UK hardcore legend. Now onto pivotal crust band Doomed.
From England.
Although starting in like '87, I think that Doom is really important for kind of solidifying the sound of like hardcore simple crust. And Police Bastard is fucking great. And have continued to play semi-often.
Didn't we see them like what, 2018 or something?
Was good, still very crusty.
They really don't like smoking cigarettes.
Super not into it.
Oh look, they're playing with Concrete Socks.
That would have been an amazing show. Thankfully, we have COVID now and can never experience that.
Yeah, this is a great relief, honestly.
Really fun.
Yeah, so Doom formed at 87. Yeah, they have so many fucking releases.
Every Doom album is pure gold, but on Rush Hour of the Gods, they did have the incredibly regrettable Phadanophobia track, which includes the verse, "Kill a Muslim, kill one today." Like, we get it, all religion is evil, but
Yeah,
come on, guys.
No, thank you. Okay, next we go to the United States, where there is one singular band responsible for bringing crust to the United States.
Nausea.
Yeah, we love New
We
York.
love New York.
Yeah, starting in the Lower East Side, Nausea, 85 to around 92. Incredibly important to American hardcore, American crust, punk in general, being heavily influenced by Discharge, Anti-Sect, and Sabbath, etc. Although they did give birth to a specific type of...
Profane Existence blow up is responsible for the terrible, terrible sounds of crust in the US from the 90s, late 90s to 2000 now.
We'll get into more of that a little later on.
Also, have to show big shout out for Misery, although forming at the same time as Nausea. they didn't release anything until 91, but coming from the capital of US crust, Minneapolis, place that burned a precinct to the ground. So
yeah, incredibly fucking sick. And also everyone's gotta love the misery split with Japan's SDS in 1992.
now to the Paris of Appalachia, home of Skullfest.
Pittsburgh, to one of my favorite bands, House Rotten.
Important for every crusty from the age of 15 to 37.
Yeah, and this footage is from the Mitzi Squad in 99.
New York!
They were active since 92. But we just saw them play 2 songs at Skullfest 2019. It was meaningful.
I cried.
House Rotten is incredibly formative to me as well because it introduced me to Spit Boy, who I've included here, from their tracks together on the Rotten Agenda. Naja also responsible for influencing bands like Anti-Product from Upstate and Anti-Schism from South Carolina.
Anti-Product singer Taina now sings and plays guitar in a world music band.
It's pretty tight. Okay, let's go international again. What do you think about that, Wombat?
All right.
Let's go to Japan. All right, let's talk about Gloom. Starting in 1991, Crash Your Crust.
I would say that speed noise hardcore rags is mandatory listening if we're talking about crust in Japan. It's hard to pinpoint what the first Japanese crust band is because a lot of Japanese hardcore, if it was coming from the US or the fucking England, would possibly be considered crust because of the strong metallic influence and discharge type sound. But important early Japanese crust bands would be Battle of Disarm, FPS, etc.
Let's talk about Xynos for a second. I was lucky enough to play with them, I think last year or 2 years ago. But Wombat, you were at the Barney show, huh?
Yeah, was
How old were you?
baby Oogle. I was 16 and did not get let in until all of the, like halfway into the set when they finally let all of us toys who didn't want to pay to get in enter the show, and it was very important for me.
Yeah.
As far as like current Crasher Crust goes, Xynos has been going strong since the early 2000s and only made their finale in 2018.
Yeah.
That's important.
R.I.P.
Blood, spit, no teeth crust. While the 90s in America is basically associated with the profane existence post-nausea sound, in Europe there was an entirely different thing going on with 90s hardcore crust, Disaffect, Sedition, Hiatus, Scatha, Jobby Crust, just to name a few. I would credit Anti-Schism with the outbreak of the emo crust thing of the 90s and early 2000s, which you Canadian losers probably know because of Ballast, Harem Scarum, Contravene, etc.
I like this stuff, honestly. You know, it feels important. It feels like an answer to Riot Girl in a way. You know, I think that is good shit, Wombat.
That Ballast record kind of fucks, though.
Hell, it fucks, definitely. It actually just got it. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of stuff going on in the United States, and we're just gonna go ahead and jump over a few of these genres that are like the neo crust, ska crust,
Stadium sound, until the later 2000s when the stenchcore revival started happening in North America with bands like Hellshock, After the Bombs of Montreal, etc.
And here's Hellshock at Alf House in Vancouver in 2018. Hi, Natalia. And now, bringing us to the present, even though there's not very much happening presently as far as live music, people have been recording some records, and I just want to give some shout out to some crust bands that have been active within at least the past 5 years or so. So here in the United States, we've had Syringe, Ailment, Gino Guys, Decomp, Rigorous Institution, Zygone, Rosie, we love you, we miss you. Life with Stars, Napalm Raid, Hour 7, Geiger Counter, on that. Appalachian Terror Unit, Fatum, Sword Wielder, in Japan, we have Asocial Terror Fabrication,
And Life, who recorded a really good record last year. Also, major shouts out to Life for being probably the longest lasting crust band in Japan, starting in '91 and continuing to play shows to this day. As we delve further and further into technological hellscape, the question of what is Crustmas future is something constantly on my mind. Increase of DIY music being based on technology and electronic abilities with the whole like SoundCloud new alternative world and computer made music of the future. I think Cress of the UK set a really good example of what might be the future sound with their drum machine based intense fucking punk that is super good. Also, they were barefoot the entire 2015 tour. Current bands and projects that are following in that suit of cyber goth, dreadfall mullet future is Lilac from Pittsburgh and Lotion from New York.
hopefully there'll be more.
Hopefully more, yeah.
Well, thank you for coming to our TED Talk, Rock and Roll High School attendees. You can subscribe to our Patreon.
Fuck Hawks. Peace out. Peace and love, peace and love, peace and love, baby.
Crust forever. Oh yeah, one more thing. The creator of the infamous chart strikes again. You'd think she would have learned her lesson the first time, and yet here we are, a crust flowchart for all of you to enjoy.
Wait, did Tricky Youth make that shit?
If anybody requests, get at me.
Tricky.
We don't mention that person's name, and no, he didn't make it.
Yeah,
It was
Tricky
what bad.
didn't make it.
Yeah, no.
Holy shit.
Okay, that was so sick. I I don't know. This is the first edition of Rock and Roll High School. We ended basically exactly on time, and also we had like almost 50 people here. That's really wild. It's also really nice to see people. I feel very starved for seeing people without masks. It's very nice. Does anyone want to discuss things? Grill Danny on Crust? Ask about MRR gossip? I don't know anything.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and say I think it was totally fine for MRR to call agnostic front Nazis. That's fine by me. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, wait, I want to say something. Okay, unrelated to what they just said. One, that was really good. Two, why do so many fucking white crusters have dreads? That's really...
I was thinking the same thing when I was making this entire video. I have to say it's probably a lot to do with like the time era and the conversations that were needed to be had that weren't being had at the time. Actually, I don't know. Maybe they were. People were just ignoring it. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Oh yeah, Danny, the link to the unlisted YouTube video.
Yeah, I'll send that right now.
Cool. Well, yeah, I don't know. This was fun. There's like more of this booked until almost the end of August, August. Oh my God. If anyone wants to be on the automatic invite list, you can send me your email either over Instagram or by email. I'll type my email in the chat. And next week we have Punk Archives and the Death of MRR Part 2. And we have 80s Polish punk and OST punk in the DDR. And yeah, same time, same place, you know, it's cool. And if anyone else wants to jump in, there will be one more date added in April. So it'll be April 18th. If anyone wants to get their, get a little lecture in, you know. And yes, yeah, I'm recording them. Of all of the ones that people said it was okay to record, I should have also mentioned that I was recording during this. However, it's just was recording like the PowerPoint and the video for the most part. If anyone has issue with like a tiny thumbnail popping up, like let me know and I'll gladly like not put it publicly. And yeah, I'll set up an archive page soon. I'm working on that already. I saw. Yes, yeah, what Sarah said. It's just, yeah, East-West punk, DDR. Yeah, all right, that's all. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully see you next week.
Thank you for putting this
Have a good
together,
one.
Sasha.
Oh, I'll write my email. I forgot to do that. If anyone wants in on the like invite list, I'll leave this open for a little bit, but good night, everyone.